Hi, I'm Joe Patton. I'm here with Kent Vincent. I'm senior partner with the law firm Patton and Patton. And what we're trying to do is provide some information to my clients. Our situation is we're coming off of this, we're right in the middle of this COVID situation. The public schools are talking about in Kansas reopening. There's some debate as to whether they're ready or not. The Board of Education just came out with over a 1,000-page report on how they want it handled, and we'll try to give you a little synopsis of that in the blog that goes with this. But lots of people have started talking about, well, maybe they don't want to go back with their kids into the public school system if they're not ready to deal with the COVID situation. And I just read this article, up to 40% of the students in the United States may be homeschooled in this next year because of the COVID situation. And they're looking at an increase of about 8.5 million children homeschooling. And that's like a 500% increase. And I've had lots of clients talk about maybe homeschooling as an option. And then I thought of you, Kent. This is Kent Vincent. And I realized we have an expert right here in Topeka. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kent, but you started Cornerstone Family Schools, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and you're attorney here. You do mostly adoption practice, that sort of thing.
That's correct.
But you were also, still local counsel for the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund, is that right?
That's correct. That's
right. And legislative liaison for the state homeschool organization, and you've actually homeschooled your own children.
Well, yeah, mostly my wife, but I helped out some, and
yeah.
We just finished up last year, 38 years of home education.
Well, my gosh, Cindy and I didn't have the courage to do that. So, okay, well, then you're the person we should be talking to. Let's just assume that we're talking to someone who is concerned about this. Their children is now in the public system, and they're thinking, well, maybe homeschooling is an option. Let's just kind of talk through this a little bit, and maybe that would help them. And we'll leave some other links down below where they can get additional information. But I think one thing that would be, give us some background. Is homeschooling legal? I mean, the law requires everybody to go to school, right?
Right. It's really become sort of a social phenomenon. Back when, nobody was homeschooling back in the 60s and 70s, there were a couple of cases in Kansas where people tried it, and the courts didn't really accept it at all. And then in about in the 70s, after the Christian school movement kind of started, people started to talk about this. A few people, when we came to Topeka, we finally found one other family that was homeschooling, and so it was really an underground movement at the time. And there was a case in, I think, 1983 where the homeschooling attempt failed. However, the Kansas Supreme Court provided some guidance on what a legitimate school would be. In Kansas, there are accredited schools, which are the public schools and some of the parochial schools, and then there's non-accredited schools, and both of them comply with the compulsory attendance law. And so there is no such thing as a legal homeschool in Kansas. We are all non-accredited private schools. And the Kansas Supreme Court simply said you got to have significant planning, testing, and competence in your teacher. And that's what the statute says. A non-accredited private school has to be maintained for this substantial equivalent period of time that a public school is in session, which is, I think, 1,116 hours over the course of the school year, has to be taught by a competent teacher. And that's all the guidance we have. And so basically what's happened in the early years, in the 80s and 90s, several families went to court. Most of them were successful, except for that one that I mentioned. And now hardly anybody has any problem unless they happen to be irresponsible.
So the answer to the question, yeah, it's legal, but you really ought to do it right.
Exactly. You know, what we encourage people is responsible exercise of the freedoms that we have here.
So what would that look like if they were doing it right? And what would be the advantages and disadvantages of someone homeschooling?
Well, if you are currently enrolled in a public school, what you need to do is disenroll, and they will have you sign a thing saying, you know, your child's going to fail if you drop out and that sort of thing. You can certainly be honest with them, and most of them have heard about homeschooling, and just tell them you're going to do that, and you're going to do it legally. You also, as a homeschool, you have to register your school with the State Department of Education. It's a very simple form, and you have to have a name and an address where the records are kept. That's all the information they request, and you want to get a copy of that, so if anybody asks, you can say, yes, we're a registered, non-accredited private school. Then the real work begins, because you got to get your planning, your curriculum, and all that put together. So
probably when you first started it years ago, there wasn't a lot of resources, but are there a lot more resources online now?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can find many resources online. There are two major conferences, usually in the spring or early summer, one in Kansas City and one in Wichita, and they will have curriculum providers there where you can see the stuff up close and handle it. The different curriculum. There are many online programs. Different colleges are offering online distance learning and that sort of thing. So there's no lack of resources available for people, but it takes a lot of work to sort out what is going to work for a particular student. And that's one of the advantages of home education, is that you can tailor make it for a particular student or group of siblings that fits your learning styles and it fits your family.
Probably one of the disadvantages is it's going to be a lot more work for parents, right?
Right. Let me just kind of go over the options and to maybe define something here, because there are some. What we've been talking about is what we call traditional homeschooling, which is parents taking full responsibility for the education of their children without government assistance. There are also currently, and there have been for the last decade or so, things called virtual schools, which are run by the public schools. Okay, there's a very large one here in Lawrence Virtual School. And those we in the homeschooling movement do not call homeschooling. We call it public school at home or virtual schools. And the reason we do that philosophically is because we want to maintain our freedom. We don't want any strings attached. I know it will look very similar, but those are programs that you can do, I think, primarily online, but it is supervised and you're under the scrutiny of the public schools when you do that. What happened this last spring with people dropping out and the attempt to do school at home, whatever, which was, I don't think, very successful because they really weren't ready for it.
Well, it wasn't. My clients, talking to the parents, basically, it was an epic fail. I mean, the kids didn't learn anything, and it was horrible.
Well, yeah, those are the reports that I've heard as well. So you can do much better than that. Again, if you want to be involved with the public school system, the virtual school is the option you should look at. If you want to have complete responsibility and freedom and a lot more work, you can do what we call homeschooling, which is to go it alone. And thankfully, there's a lot of resources out there, including here in Kansas, that you can take advantage of.
Okay, great. Well, I think we'll wrap this up because you sent me some links to web pages where people can go get additional information, additional resources, ask questions, and I'll add that in the article below. And Kent, if someone wanted to get a hold of you to ask you some additional questions, are you open to that?
Sure.
How would they get a hold of you?
Okay, my phone here in Topeka is 785-234-0022. And if they wanted to email a question, it would be akvlawgm@gmail.com.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Kent. You're great.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Good to talk to you. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.